Pillars of Eternity is undoubtedly a huge game, and such games are never spared from content cuts. Sadly, some of the worst ones happened to arguably the most interesting companions, Durance and the Grieving Mother, both written by Chris Avellone, the mastermind behind Planescape Torment. And let me tell you, he had some really interesting ideas for those two. Unfortunately, the Grieving Mother and Durance went through a development hell no lesser than the game itself. So let me show you just how many circles that hell had and what we lost forever to the grim reality of production process. The original backstories of Durance and the Grieving Mother were intertwined and somewhat different than in the final game. Quite interestingly, it's the Collector Edition's guide that reveals it. Durance's section says that he spent many years following the Saints' War persecuting Eotha's worshippers, and then those he believed responsible for the Hollowborn crisis, the Grieving Mother among them. You see, unlike in the final game, she was actually blamed for the births of Hollowborn children in her community. This led Durance to torture the Grieving Mother both physically and spiritually until she retaliated. However, the guide says that the damage she inflicted on him was, quote, considerable and far outweighed what was done to her, unquote. Despite these events, the Grieving Mother would not blame Durance for the physical and spiritual torment she suffered. She wouldn't even recognize him in the party because his soul would be different from when they first met. Durance wouldn't recognize her either because the Grieving Mother shapes the way others see her with her cipher abilities. Apparently, this kind of goes both ways because she sees others through their souls, not their physical appearance. It's quite possible that gods perceive mortals the same way, and that's why Magran did not recognize Durance in the Council of Stars. Although, I have a feeling that originally it might have been whatever the Grieving Mother did to Durance that caused this particular anomaly, not the Godhammer bomb. Interestingly, the Collector's Guide says that they were both recruitable in Magran's Fork, and I think that was no coincidence. This is my imagination talking, but I like to think they were compelled to come to the place and meet the Watcher. The idea reminds me of Torment, in which Anna was also inexplicably forced to find the Nameless One in the Alley of Lingering Sighs. After all, the Watcher does have a way of beckoning troubled or even tormented souls to them, and the Watcher was an important piece of the puzzle. You see, the Collector's Guide says that the Grieving Mother and Durance may come to odds or reconciliation, and it most likely hinged on the damage they did to each other's souls. Chris Avellone told RPG Codex that, quote, the Watcher could fix it mentally by repairing their souls by walking through their minds in stages, unquote. And this brings us to the best part. Back in very early 2015, Avellone did an interview for Expat, which has been long since offline, where he said that, quote, the original premise was unpeeling the layers and discovering what they were at the core. Unpeeling these layers involved slipping stealthily into their unconscious, a dungeon made out of their memories, to uncover their shared history, how it impacted you, and the core of who they were as people. And their core was pretty unpleasant. Both of them were very bad, very weak people, committing not only violations on each other, but on the player as well, unquote. But where there is crime, there must also be punishment, and Avellone wanted to explore this theme in the context of Eora, the Pillars of Eternity universe. He talked about how its mechanics of souls redefine the meaning and nature of punishment. As he put it, quote, if you intend to punish someone in a world like that, how do you do it when execution is not an answer, unquote. What he meant is that, lore-wise, an execution of an individual simply returns their soul into the wheel, giving it a fresh start within another individual who's none the wiser. Otherwise, there is no afterlife in Eora, no mechanism of punishing the wicked and rewarding the just. The only punishment for an individual is the fear and agony of death. Unless of course they experience an awakening in the next life. Now that can be a bitch, as evidenced multiple times in the game. For example, I loved the story of a minor NPC in the asylum named Freyo. She talked about how she remembered her past life as a noble and suddenly lost all happiness in her present commoner life. She was doomed to a life of depression as nothing pleased her anymore. Everything was a painful downgrade. But here's the thing, if such an awakening was a form of punishment, would it be justice? Is it fair to punish an individual for a past life they don't remember in a present life they did not ask for? It really brings the paranoid incarnation from Planescape Torment to mind. He was batshit insane, sure, but was it at all surprising given the circumstances? This indeed would have been a very interesting theme to explore, and I'd love to see Chris Avellon's take on it. I just feel we lost something potentially great here, you know? Another thing about the Grieving Mother that is missing from the final game is her potential evil path. The guide says that, quote, she is strongly motivated to end the Hollowborn crisis, even if it causes other problems, and she would kill without hesitation to protect her primary goals, ending the crisis and protecting the player. The Grieving Mother is in a state of deep mourning. Her substantial desire to see her children resurrected may lead her down a dark path, unquote. There's a lot to unpack here. First off, we can see that she does have that means to an end approach in her. If led by a cruel or deceptive watcher, she could have fallen to the temptation of even the most insane measures to try and cure the Hollowborn. And during the campaign, we hear of many crimes committed while trying to break the curse, so who knows what she could have come up with. As for her children, I'm pretty sure her children should be interpreted as the Hollowborn she helped give birth to. She was still a midwife in this version of the script after all. But that state of deep mourning and desperation can push one to do terrible things. Actually, it would have been great to see alternate arcs for both. Remorse eating away at Durance and the Grieving Mother committing terrible crimes to stop the Hollowborn crisis. With both of them turning half-circle, their story would have made a 360 in a way, leading to a bitter conclusion, but a one that is food for thought. I just can't help but think of Baldur's Gate 1 and the opening quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. So now we know what was cut, but what about the why of it? Well, Eric Fenstermaker, the lead narrative designer, told RPG Codex that, quote, the cuts came for length. The three limiting factors were time to implement, art resources for the dream sequences, and VO budget, unquote. While Fenstermaker regretted the cuts, even calling them, quote, a shitty thing to have to do, he also said Obsidian wouldn't have been able to ship Pillars of Eternity on time if they hadn't been done. Unfortunately, if only this was so simple. You see, Chris Avellon challenged a lot of what Eric Fenstermaker claimed in his interview. Most notably, he said that there was a lack of clear communication during development by saying, quote, of those three reasons, the first one was the only one I ever recall communicated to me. The other two reasons weren't, and I actually got multiple other reasons from multiple people, and some of those people admitted they were just the messenger. This confused things since they couldn't articulate what the critiques were since they either didn't understand them or hadn't read the material. In other words, it seems like a lot of time that could have been spent on implementation was instead wasted on an overlong and unproductive review process. Ironically, Avellon added that making the cuts that were eventually requested took him only a couple of hours. But then, Durance and the Grieving Mother were passed down for further editing to Eric Fenstermaker and Kerry Patel, respectively. The former also wrote Adair, while the latter wrote Alof and Sagani. Recently, Patel was the game director of Avowed, by the way. But anyway, the two companions still did add some work to the already busy designers. In Durance's case, we even know the scope of the work that had to be done. Eric Fenstermaker said that, quote, I wrote some of his environmental reactivity, and then all of his banter with other companions and his interjections into other conversations. I also gave the player an opportunity to call him out on his self-deception and hypocrisy. I had to make some minor edits to get everything to line up and make sense when his dialogue was pared down for length, but not a whole lot. Chris chose what to cut, and it was fairly clean. There was a layer that could be removed without losing the base of the character. Kerry's work on the Grieving Mother would have been similar, though I'm not sure about the specifics, unquote. As for the art resources limitation, Chris Avellon seemed to think that it was exaggerated, saying that, quote, the art for the dream sequences would have required maybe 12 images, and it was designed so you could do one large image and split the scene, so each image could be repurposed. I will say there were other cuts, the Grieving Mother's special Planescape weapons and Durance variant equipment, that were just simply dropped and would have required little in the way of resources. It was more a matter of will versus time in some instances. With voiceover, Avellon agreed that it's very expensive, but he wasn't aware at the time that it was such a big problem. Moreover, he said that if he had been aware of it, he would have, quote, asked them not to voice the grieving mother. She gets along fine with the whispery mind effect, especially since it's supposed to be telepathy. Why not make the strengths of the franchise work for you and save resources? Win-win. And of the excess text, there's no reason for Durance to speak in the dream sequences that were cut. I'm not sure he did much anyway. So again, lack of communication, which means bad management. A recurring motif in Obsidian's history, it seems. I mean, looking at their history of buggy games with lots of cut content, it does seem like the constraints Eric Fenstermaker mentioned were symptoms, not the cause. In general, the development of Pillars of Eternity was apparently a huge shitshow, and the case of Durance and the Grieving Mother is just but one example of it. But I think the game's troubled development is a tale for another time. All in all, despite all the cuts and less than ideal implementation, I think Chris Avellone succeeded in his goal to, quote, write Planescape-style companions and try to do something interesting that would set them apart from being solely traditional fantasy, unquote. Not only that, but I think they very naturally expose the player to the game universe and tie in with the narrative very well. Frankly, in terms of companions, Durance and the Grieving Mother carried Pillars of Eternity for me in 2015 and 2025. But I'll save my thoughts on the game for the 10th anniversary Pillars of Eternity retrospective. It might already be up, depending on when you're watching this video. For now, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this one, consider subscribing to the channel and also remember to send your likes and comments to the wheel of the YouTube algorithm.